real estate is another. They say that real estate runs on jobs. A lot of people are out of work. So the question is, when PPE ends here, are people still going to be able to afford their mortgage? How's the real estate going to respond? What do you think about that, Eric?
Well, I found a good article that I shared on the official Liberty Starship Twitter feed, and let me bring it up here. This is from KJZZ, which is a radio station in the Phoenix metro area.
That's
And
NPR.
I'm sorry?
That's an NPR affiliate.
I don't know. I don't know that off the top of my head if they're affiliated with NPR or not.
Okay.
But what this article talks about is the housing market as it was in Arizona, in the state of Arizona. And it said Phoenix had a housing crisis before, and the pandemic could make it worse. And one of the things that you and I have talked about numerous times is that the pandemic has exposed fundamental problems in the economy that were there before and made them worse or made them come to light. And it says they have a story about this woman who lost her job and ended up having to live in her car, her personal story. But it says nearly 600,000 Arizonans have applied for unemployment insurance since late March. And it said the governor placed a moratorium on enforcement of some evictions through July, but rent is still due. And services like UMOM are seeing a dramatic rise in demand. Now, what's interesting here is this personal story of this particular family I thought was really shocking to me, because I did think that in Arizona, evictions were placed on a moratorium. So I do question exactly how this happened to this particular person. But the wider point of this article is basically talking about how the Phoenix housing market has been going up for quite some time, and affordable housing is getting harder and harder to find in Arizona, which is interesting. I know you shared an article on the feed as well about San Francisco, where there's an opposite trend happening, and they attribute a lot of it to telecommuting, where you actually have places in San Francisco where the rent is actually going down. And many people attribute that to, again, the pandemic and the telecommuting that's going on. But this article basically is stating that before the pandemic happened, there had been this upward trend with housing costs in Arizona because there is a shortage of supply. There simply is not enough housing to keep up with the increases in population. Obviously, Phoenix is a boom town. The Phoenix metro area has been growing and growing and growing. The state of Arizona has been growing and growing and growing. So right now, what they're trying to say in this article is that there has been a shortage of housing in Arizona for quite some time, and the pandemic has caused this problem to be highlighted even more.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very strange times because people are not buying houses in large numbers because they're uncertain what's going to happen. People are not selling their houses in large numbers because they're not sure what's going to happen. And so you have a big drop in supply, a big drop in demand. You've started to see the commercial real estate market pick up a little bit now that business is sort of getting back to normal. But in general, the market seems to be very, there's not a lot of volume. Not a lot of
Well, this
volume.
particular article is also concentrating on sort of affordable housing, like renters, not
Right.
necessarily people that are actually buying houses or even necessarily renting houses, because
Yeah.
you can sometimes renting a house is quite expensive,
Hmm.
and you assume that apartment will be cheaper, right?
Right.
That's not always the case. That's
No.
certainly not the case. I know that there, even in my own lifetime, there's apartments that I had that were much smaller than the townhouse I live in now, and I that is financed and I make payments on, and my payments for financing are lower than my rent was. You know what I mean, for like a 2-bedroom apartment. That certainly does happen, but the lack of affordable housing is really what this article is about. Is that when you talk about the typical working class person, they're getting phased out more and more in the Phoenix market.
Right. So the question is, what are city councils going to do? Are they going to start issuing more permits? Can they even convince builders to build more houses. It seems like there's a long-term downward trend in the number of housing starts nationwide. Phoenix, Arizona seems to have a lot of construction, but still there is a shortage. Why? What is wrong with the market? It seems like there's some sort of a disconnect there, and we'll keep monitoring this story.